Welcome to the Sidecar Sync podcast, your home for all things innovation, artificial intelligence, and associations. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Sidecar Sync, your home for content at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the wide world of associations. My name is Amith Nagarajan.
And my name is Mallory Mejias.
And we are your hosts, and we have an episode for you today. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some interesting topics, and we'll be wading through them shortly. But in the meantime, before we get there, how are you doing, Mallory?
I'm doing really well, Amith. Having a good week so far. I was just telling you I have family visiting this weekend, my sister, her husband, and their 3 young children. So I will be in full aunt mode, which I'm excited about. And I do feel like exploring a city as an adult is very different from exploring a city when you have children. So I'll get to kind of see Atlanta through children's eyes, which should be fun.
Yeah, that will be fun. And, you can kind of simulate what they're going to do ahead of time with ChatGPT or Claude and then get some good ideas. So,
that's a good idea. I haven't done that yet. I wonder, now that you're saying that, I wonder if they've had any exposure to ChatGPT or Claude. So that might be fun. They're going to hang out with us Friday night. We were planning to do a little Halloween fall evening. So maybe I'll blow their minds with some ChatGPT stuff.
that'd be fun, or show them Sora, or make some songs together with Suno, or do Notebook LM, or
or maybe Google Nano. I could take their picture and put them into a cool scene.
Yeah,
that could be fun. I like where your head's at, Amith.
All this Sizzle stuff with AI is pretty cool. I think it's great to get people's attention with it. And like we've been talking about, it's interesting because where the value gets created isn't necessarily where the sizzle is, although the sizzle is definitely interesting and important to keep aware of, because that's what opened our eyes to AI as a community, right? I mean, a number of people, including myself, have been involved with AI for a long time preceding the launch of ChatGPT as this moment in time that everyone remembers in the fall of 2022. But it does take moments like that to shift the pattern of interaction, the pattern of attention, because prior to that moment in time, and really probably 6 months after that is when people in this market really started paying close attention. But prior to that, AI was just kind of hype to people, or it was just that's just some technical thing people are talking about, but it's never going to be real. So going back to the sizzle, I think getting young people's attention through really cool ways that they can engage with it, I think is important, because there is seemingly a divide between younger folks in terms of their interest and willingness to use AI. I was speaking at my son's school last year. He was a junior in high school last year, now he's a senior, and I was asked to go speak to the computer science program there, and I was happy to do that, and I showed them some really cool AI coding things, and I just asked them, how many of you are using AI? How do you feel about it? And I got a lot of different answers, even from kids that are taking computer science. Some of them were pretty negative about it, and one of my kids is not particularly fond of AI. I think we've talked about that before too. So I think getting people aware of it is important, because part of it is the thing we keep coming back to, Mallory, that the bottom line is whether you like it or you hate it, it's in your world now, just like electricity and telephones and the internet. And so if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to use it well, you've got a problem. It's kind of like showing up to work somewhere and saying, what's this thing called internet search? I've never heard of Google before. I don't know how to use Microsoft Word or similar tools. You don't stand much of a chance of being employed if you have that kind of a gap in your abilities. So I think the same thing is true for AI now. It'll definitely be true by the time my kids graduate from college in a few years.
Yep. And maybe the time my nieces and nephews graduate, maybe we'll invite one of them on the podcast. Maybe a 7-year-old's take on AI could be fun. Everybody listening, if you do have an interest in kind of understanding and hearing how young people are using AI, we have a really good episode with Connor and Finn Grennan, which is a father-son duo. Finn, I think at the time, was 16 years old in high school, and he was obviously a big AI advocate. And if I'm not mistaken, both of them will be at digitalNow this year, right?
That is right. Yeah, we're very pleased to have the two of them lead a keynote and be part of a panel that I think you're moderating, Mallory, later that day. And
I didn't know if Finn, I knew Connor was going to be there, but is Finn actually giving a presentation too? Wow.
He is. Super excited to have him, and I think he's going to be a very highly sought after person after he speaks, and people understand what he's been doing with AI. So won't spoil that further, but it's definitely another good reason for you to go to your web browser or go to ChatGPT and ask it to buy a ticket for you at digitalNow. So get going on
Try it
that.
out. Use some computer use. I've got to say, Finn Grennan is going to have like the best college application this world has ever seen by the time he's applying.
I agree.
All right. Well, today, as Amith mentioned, we've got an exciting episode like we always do. We're going to talk about 3 topics that might seem a little bit unrelated at first, but they're all kind of about the same thing: who's winning in AI and automation and what happens to everybody else. So we're starting with a robotic hand from China that has engineers calling it a game changer, then moving to major companies making AI training mandatory, and finishing with new data showing AI adoption is splitting along economic lines. So starting off first with the Wuji hand. A company in Shenzhen called Wuji Tech just unveiled a robotic hand that's turning heads in the robotics world, and turning hands too, I suppose. It represents a fundamental departure from how most advanced robotic hands work. Unlike Tesla's Optimus hand or most competitors that use tendon-driven systems, this is where motors sit in the forearm, pulling cables like puppet strings. The Wuji hands puts micro actuators directly inside each finger segment. It has 20 degrees of freedom with 4 independent joints per finger. And as a reminder, degrees of freedom refers to the number of independent movements a robot hand or a robot in general can make, which is determined by its joints, essentially making each tiny finger in this hand a little robot. The hand itself weighs less than 600 grams or about 1.3 pounds. It measures approximately 8 inches and can lift 44 pounds in a power grip and 11 pounds in a pinch with just 2 fingers. The technical advantage here is significant. Direct drive motors in the fingers eliminate the transmission losses and mechanical slack that plague tendon-based systems, giving much greater control and precision and repeatability. This dramatically reduces what engineers call the simulation to reality gap, the difference between how a robot performs in computer simulations versus in the real world. Tendon systems are hard to model accurately because cable tension varies, but direct drive actuation is predictable and consistent. So how does this compare in the competitive landscape? Well, it sits in a powerful sweet spot. Tesla's Optimus hand has 10 to 16 degrees of freedom using tendons and weighs about 1.5 to 2 pounds. The Shadow robot hand, a research-grade system costing over $100,000, has 24 degrees of freedom and advanced tactile sensors, but is complex and less focused on durability or scalability. The Wuji hand is more dexterous than commercial options, more robust than research prototypes, and potentially more affordable at scale. Experts are noting that Wuji could outpace Western models in manufacturability and consistency, and the direct drive architecture is now influencing design choices in rival hands, pushing the entire field toward more reliable robotics. We will include a link to the demo from Wuji Tech in the show notes. Amith, I think you've seen it. It's pretty jarring. I know it's just a hand, but it actually looks like someone just chopped off an actual human hand, and it's moving its fingers, it's waving, it has a pen between 2 of its fingers, as you might do at your desk. So it's really insanely impressive. Amith, what was your initial take?
The same thing. I think it was impressive. I think the fact that, this direct actuators concept that you talked about is a big thing, because making those motors essentially small enough and powerful enough to actually be useful is the key, right? So very, very small and very, very powerful relative to size, requires innovation. And there's some really cool things that have happened here. So that's going to make everything much easier to scale in terms of the complexity of movements that this hand can make. The hand is being focused on so much so in robotics because it represents perhaps the most complex aspect of our anatomy, and how to replicate that so that robots can interact with the physical world that we've created to suit our bodies. So if we can make a hand very effective, that means that a lot of robotic applications in the home or in the office, outside of industrial settings where this is still very useful, but industrial settings are more predictable, and you can use robotics in ways that don't necessarily require a human style interface. But I find it fascinating. I think that it just is another example of the compounding of multiple different exponentials, be it material science or the energy curve with batteries, and the ability, of course, to have the algorithms move fast enough to take in all the data and respond. So it's to me, it's a very exciting thing.
Hmm. I mentioned the reduction of the simulation to reality gap with this hand. Can you talk a little bit about that and why reducing that gap is going to lead to probably a ton of innovation and advancements?
Sure. One way to think about it is if you have a degree of separation between something you're trying to do and something that you're controlling, the more of those degrees of separation, the more opportunity there is for a loss of information potentially, or just a challenge in kind of controlling it. Think about, for example, if you've ever had a trailer attached to the back of your vehicle and you've had to back it up. You're going forward, it's not really that much more difficult to drive a car or a truck with a trailer attached to it. You have to be a little bit thoughtful about turns you make and how much room you give yourself. But if you're backing up, you kind of have to invert what you've taught your brain to do, right? Because the trailer moves in the opposite direction of where the back of your car is going. And so when you think about that, you say, okay, well, that's kind of like how it would be with a ligament connecting to the actual joint you're trying to move. It isn't necessarily the inverse, but it's a degree of separation that causes additional complexity. And there's more variables in the mix. So they were talking about the fact that you eliminate the tendons eliminates the variability in the overall strength of the tendon, but also the flexibility of the tendon, things like that. And so that's a very important variable that's hard to predict consistently. And when you have manufacturing processes producing these things, you're going to have a lot more consistent performance. So it's all of those things. It simplifies the model that the AI has to understand in order to control the robotic, hand or any other type of device, essentially.
Hmm. We had an episode, someone recently, where we talked about physical AI, and Jim Fan from NVIDIA proposing the physical Turing test, which in his presentation was having maybe a party at your house, or I think it was a hackathon in his situation, leaving, your house is a wreck, pizza boxes everywhere, you come home, you got a candlelit dinner made for you, the house is impeccably spotless, and you as a human can't tell whether that dinner was cooked and the house was cleaned by a fellow human or a robot. So I feel like this is perhaps a step in the direction of that physical Turing test. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I mean, you have a lot of different to achieve that outcome. You have lots of different pieces that need to be built that don't exist today. So the type of really nimble robotics that you need in order to navigate those environments and to be able to do all sorts of arbitrary tasks like that with enough strength to be effective, but not so much strength that it breaks things, right? So you don't want to have, you come back and it's like, oh, well, but by the way, it did all of that. But in the closet, there is a whole bunch of debris from all the broken dishes and broken glassware and other things that the robot destroyed in the process of creating that meal for you. So ideally, some people may consider that a tolerable outcome, but I think that most people would require the robot to be at least as good at not breaking things as a human in that capacity. So, and of course, that puts a pretty high bar out there because, we've gotten pretty good. I haven't at cooking meals, but we collectively as a species have gotten pretty good at cooking. I know how to make eggs. That's about it.
Hey, that's something. Eggs can
Yeah.
be tough. I don't know. Eggs can be
Well,
kind of challenging.
and I can only do scrambled eggs, so my range is very limited.
Okay, so you're a one egg type of guy. Hey, that
I'm
works.
one and done. That's what I do, and then I'm done cooking for the day. So, but I think a robot will be able to beat me. I don't think it'll be able to beat my wife, who is a professional chef, and others who are somewhere between the two of us in terms of range of skills. But I think that the other thing that obviously is important is the speed at which AI models can inference the stimuli they're receiving from a variety of sensors, including video and potentially radar or laser detectors, where you have a robot in the physical world. And the robot needs to continuously feed this data back to the brain, essentially, which is the AI model that's running. And so if it takes the AI model more time than real time to inference on that input and make a decision, you have a problem. So you need really fast, localized AI to run there. You can't afford, the latency of a network, and you need to have something that inferences in, single digit or low double digit milliseconds in order to do a lot of this stuff you're talking about. So there's a lot of really interesting things coming back to the AI conversation we usually have, but here we have many different innovations required to have this kind of, physical manifestation of AI.
Mm-hmm. What do you think association leaders can take away from this besides that's a pretty cool robot hand?
It's pretty cool. The video is also a little bit creepy.
Yeah.
You should take away that this stuff is coming. That the other thing that we don't really fully appreciate here in the Western world is how incredibly advanced at robotics the Chinese are. And this is one example of many. And there's a lot in terms of not only the research side, which we're talking about, that's quickly being commercialized, but the deployment of robots in industrial settings and otherwise that we're radically outstripped. I was listening to a podcast, I'm trying to remember which one, fairly recently, that talked about last year, China deployed something on the order of magnitude of 500,000 industrial robots, and we deployed, in the United States, we deployed something like 40,000. So, it's dramatically more adoption. And so when you adopt the technology at scale, you learn a lot more about it and you move faster, and then you can iterate faster. So I think that it's a bit of a wake-up call that, number one, this is not 20 years from now. This is probably 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now. And in your industry, in your profession, this will have an effect. So let's say your association is in something medical related, or maybe your association is in the world of engineering. There's lots of physical things that happen in those worlds. And so if this capability exists all of a sudden, right? It's not all of a sudden, but it feels that way, then it's going to affect your members. It's going to affect your profession. So, to bare minimum, you as an association leader should have some general familiarity with the trend line of what's happening with robotics, so that you understand how it affects your members. And then, of course, there's lots of things we do within association operations where robotics may be helpful. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. But the more important thing is the trend line. Hopefully, like the Sizzle we talked about earlier, this is the kind of thing that might attract people into saying, this is really interesting. I wasn't that interested in AI before, but for some reason, this caught my attention. So that's part of it as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely watch the video, and I think it will catch your attention for sure. All right, moving to topic 2, the AI literacy mandate movement. Can you all believe we're reporting on this? We are witnessing a fundamental shift in how organizations view AI education. It's no longer about whether to train employees on AI, it's about when and how. Citibank just made headlines by mandating AI training for all 175,000 employees globally, requiring completion within just 60 days. Their program is called Asking Smart Questions, Prompting Like a Pro, and it uses adaptive learning technology that experts can complete in 10 minutes while beginners get 30 minutes. JP Morgan now requires AI training for all new hires as part of onboarding. Bank of America reports over 90% of its workforce uses AI tools after completing training. Wells Fargo has trained thousands through Stanford's human-centered AI curriculum. PwC has integrated AI literacy into company culture through gamified monthly tournaments and quizzes. This trend extends beyond corporate America, though. The EU's AI Act, effective February of 2025, legally mandates AI competency training for all employees who interact with or operate AI systems. Companies must ensure personnel acquire sufficient AI knowledge, including technical understanding and context of use. Germany and other EU member states are implementing mandatory training protocols for compliance. Meanwhile, over 250 CEOs from companies like Adobe, AMD, American Airlines, and Cognizant signed an open letter urging mandatory AI education in all K-12 U.S. schools. So the shift, I think, is clear. AI literacy is transitioning from nice to have to must have, although I think at Sidecar we've always said it was a must have. Leading AI training firms report surging demand for customized mandatory learning paths, role-based corporate workshops, and compliance certification. Organizations are treating AI fluency the same way they treat cybersecurity awareness or workplace safety, as a baseline competency every employee needs, not an optional skill for technical teams. Amith, is this just music to your ears, this whole topic?
Yeah, surprise, surprise that we picked this topic for the Sidecar Sync podcast, where we've been known to take a fairly forward-looking stance, some might say aggressive stance, with respect to AI training. So very much music to my ears that organizations are doing this, and not actually really for their benefit. I do like it to see when companies improve themselves and become more effective and all that, but mainly because I think it's so critical that big organizations that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees treat their people right and lead them into the future. I've been known to say that if you are not only offering but mandating AI training for your people, you are committing leadership malpractice. And the reason that we have taken such a strong stance on this is because of a very simple fact. I don't think anyone would argue, even if they don't like AI very much or they're not using it very much, most people would not argue that AI isn't going to affect the skills required by the workforce. We just talked about that earlier. So, to the extent that you believe that AI is going to significantly affect the skills and experiences that are required to be an effective employee, basically anywhere in the world, it is really critical as a leader that you prepare your workforce for that, not only to serve your organization, of course, that's important, but to serve those individuals' futures. That's your job as a leader. Your job is to grow people. That's the product that you're making in your organization, whether you're a software company or a professional services company or you're an association. Your job is to grow people. And so as a leader, you are not serving your employees or your volunteers if you are not providing them AI training, and to the extent that you agree with this statement, to really truly mandate it, to deeply drive a stake into the ground and say, we're doing this and you have to do this. It's optional to the extent that you don't want to work here anymore. We can't literally force you to do something, but if you want to stay employed here, you will complete this AI training. I think it's really important that leaders do that, because the optional things, we've seen this over and over with the Sidecar AI Learning Hub for Teams. Associations they sign up and they sign up everyone. We only sell that product on an all-you-can-eat basis, meaning there's no metering of seats. Everyone in your organization plus 100 volunteers get access to the platform. And so the whole idea is to not make it a scarce resource, right? To make it available for everyone. But we see different adoption curves. When you have a leader that takes that stands up tall and says, listen, this is the most important technology shift we will probably ever experience in our lifetimes, and everyone here has to get on board with this and understand it. You have very broad adoption. We've seen organizations have 100% participation rates, not just in taking the courses, but getting the AIP cert. So that's super exciting. And then we also see organizations that only get 10, 20, 30% of their employee base to go do it. And it's directly correlated to this idea of, is it mandatory or not? A lot of leaders in this market are not comfortable with that. They're more comfortable with the idea of consensus or committee-based decision-making or opt-in. And I understand that, but this is not a time to focus on being comfortable. It's a time to focus on results for your people and for your organization. So to me, the city announcement absolutely was music to my ears.
I thought so, Amith. And really, that we didn't know Citi was doing this. The topic just kind of fell into our laps, but it worked out well.
For sure.
I've worked with a few association leaders, some of the teams that have gotten into the AI Learning Hub, and we've taken kind of a firm stance on the idea of mandating versus voluntary learning. However, within mandating AI education, there's kind of different levels of that, different tiers. So I wanted to get your take. We've had some associations try to cherry pick certain courses that they would mandate, and then some would be optional. What is your opinion on having role-specific AI education, more general AI education? Does everybody need to know the technical stuff? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, by the way, knowing that I like this topic doesn't take a particularly advanced LLM to predict that outcome, I guess. So, it's just if you've listened to me talk for more than about 10 seconds, you know that I'm really deeply passionate about this. I mean, our mission at Sidecar is to educate 1 million people in the vertical by the end of the decade, because we think that is the single most important thing we can do on our end to affect that outcome to drive changes in the sector. So, I would say that to your question, the most important thing, Mallory, in my opinion, is just doing something. So you have to have some kind of AI training. It can be the free courses that are out there from Google or Microsoft or OpenAI, and now Anthropic. They have free courses. Now, most of these vendors, of course, their free courses do talk about their tools, but the idea is it doesn't really matter. Just do something and make it mandatory. Obviously, we at Sidecar offer the AI Learning Hub for association people, which has role-specific training for membership and for marketing and for finance, and ethics training around AI specifically contextualized for associations. So the reason we built that is we felt there would be value in providing context-specific AI education, which is continually updated and all of that. But the goal here isn't to pitch you Sidecar. Lots of people are finding that it's a great fit. But to me, the most important thing is people doing something. So yes, having some baseline minimalist education. Citi's thing isn't a 3-week training course. It's an hour or whatever you said earlier, right? It's under an hour. So It's very reasonable. You can't mandate something that's unachievable. You want to mandate something that's quite reasonable. Hopefully, there will be people in that group, that the group of everyone, that are so intrigued that they want to take more advanced courses. So you should definitely offer that. And in some roles, you may mandate additional training. In the context of the sidecar content, we typically see people mandating the foundations course and the prompting course. Those are the two most fundamental, I think, that give a student a really clear understanding of what AI is, how it works, how to apply it to their jobs and their association roles. So that's important. And then, of course, having electives essentially beyond that, I think, allows the more interested learners to go further.
Mm-hmm. I think I've gotten some of your aggressiveness around AI education through osmosis from you and Meath, I guess, on the podcast, because I always would tell people, and maybe this is too aggressive, but I feel like AI is blurring so many lines. Like if you traditionally work in marketing and have never been involved in software development, like AI is blurring all those lines. So I would always tell people, like, I think you should mandate all of them. And they're already in the learning hub. So it's really to no benefit of like Sidecar personally. But my thought being, you never know what you can learn from a course outside of your role. I
Totally.
don't know what you think about that, but
No, look, first of all, I don't think there's such a thing as too aggressive, Mallory. It's like saying there's too much ice cream in the world or something like that.
I don't know if everybody agrees with yes, but you're right.
I know. I'm kind of ridiculous about that, but my role is to play that kind of function in this community, and I really believe in it. Obviously, I'm not doing it at a theater. It's just the reality is that people have to get aggressive in order to drive change. You can't drive meaningful change certainly quickly enough if you take a passive approach or kind of a moderate approach. You have to be pretty aggressive about it, and that's where we've seen the best results. Is that you have leader or leaders, preferably a whole leadership team, standing up and saying, "We're going to go do this thing." But I think that what you're describing is a really important insight, Mallory, that it's not just about what you find to be the most obvious thing that's you have expertise in, like, oh, I'm a finance person, I'm going to do the finance course, or I'm a marketing person, I'll do the marketing course. That's wonderful. But, cross-pollinate that stuff, learn something that's a little bit outside of your wheelhouse. So I think that's important. I also think learning needs to be done in a consumable way. You can have a big push initially, but the most powerful thing is if you get people learning continuously. So what I always tell people when I deliver keynotes and workshops and stuff is to say, listen, what you need to do is really simple. I'm talking to the individual at this point, not the organization. I'm saying go on your calendar and block off 15 minutes every day as a recurring appointment in the morning, in the evening, at some time during the day. Make an appointment with yourself for 15 minutes and make it your AI learning block where you are going to dedicate that time every day consistently to learn something about AI. And if you do that over and over and over and over again, then you will become very knowledgeable. And then you will become eventually an expert. And then eventually you'll become a world-class expert, actually quite quickly within a matter of a couple of years of practicing a habit as simple as 15 minutes a day. So to me, that's what it's about, is it's the repetitions, it's the continuous focus on it. Just taking the course by itself, if you are determined not to learn anything about AI, you can go and complete the course and be on your way, and you'll still be effectively incompetent at using the AI tools. But if you go and tinker with them every day and couple that with some formal training, I think you're going to do really well.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, something I've learned in my life, Amith, and I'm sure that you have too, and especially all of our association listeners, is education is the one of the most beautiful gifts you can give yourself or give to others. So I think there's just a lot of power in doing that, especially in determining your future and your team's future.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people over time annoyed at me by making like employees at companies I've been part of that said, hey, you have to go do this training or whatever. I've had plenty of people, grumble about that, ahead of time. I don't really recall, I might have selective memory here, but I'm pretty sure I have not ever heard a complaint after someone's received the education that it was, because if you do a decent job of picking something that's useful, people tend to find value in that. Even if it wasn't their choice to go through it, there's still value accrued to them.
Yep. And that value just keeps compounding, right? Like years after you take it.
Totally.
At Sidecar, we know the power of bringing the brightest, most innovative minds out there together in person to learn and grow. And that's exactly what we do at our annual conference, digitalNow. digitalNow is a 2.5-day conference bringing Silicon Valley and executive-level content to the association space. We bring in expert speakers from places like Google, Amazon, and the U.S. Department of State to share insights on emerging technologies and how they're reshaping the future of associations. Whether you come solo or bring your team to collaborate and implement together, you'll leave with a clear vision for what's next. Join us November 2nd through 5th, 2025 at the Lowe's Hotel in Chicago. To secure your spot, visit digitalnow.sidecar.ai.
Want to lead your team into the AI future? Sidecar's AI Learning Hub for Teams equips your association with practical, on-demand AI education. From self-paced courses to live office hours, your whole team gets the skills to use AI without the jargon. Empower your team. Build AI confidence together. Visit sidecar.ai/LH4T to get started.
Moving to topic 3 for today, we're going to talk about Anthropic's economic index. So Anthropic just released its 3rd economic index report analyzing millions of conversations across Claude.ai and API customers, mapping AI adoption across over 150 countries and all 50 U.S. states. They created what they call the Anthropic AI Usage Index, or AUI for short, which adjusts for population size to show who uses Claude more than expected. The findings reveal a pretty stark pattern. AI adoption splits largely along economic lines. For every 1% increase in GDP per capita, there's about a 0.7 or 0.7% increase in AI usage. Small, wealthy, tech-oriented nations like Singapore, Israel, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea lead adoption, while larger emerging economies like India, Indonesia, and Nigeria show far below average use. Within the U.S., the correlation is even stronger. A 1% higher per capita GDP means a 1.8% higher AI use. This is exciting for everybody. Washington, D.C. leads with an Anthropic usage index of 3.82, followed by Utah. Amith, I know you're excited about that, at 3.78. You're probably single-handedly contributing to that when you're there. And then California and New York. The report reveals fascinating shifts over time as well. So software engineering remains the largest use case at about 40% of conversations, but knowledge-intensive fields have surged since December 2024. Educational tasks are up 40%, science is up 33%, while business and finance tasks decline proportionally. Higher adoption countries use Claude for a wider variety, including education, science, art, and administration, while lower adoption countries focus more narrowly on coding and automation. Perhaps most striking, directive automation has jumped from 27% to 39% since December of 2024. For the first time, automation overall has overtaken augmentation, as people increasingly let Claude handle tasks autonomously rather than collaborating. The business data tells an even more dramatic story. API customers, mostly businesses paying per token, show 77% automation patterns versus a 50-50 split on Claude.ai. They're heavily concentrated in coding and administrative tasks, with 44% of API traffic mapping to computer or mathematical work. Businesses show positive correlation between cost and usage, suggesting capabilities matter more than token expense. Anthropic frames this as a potential AI divergence, like electrification or the combustion engine, where a general-purpose technology drives growth but widens inequality. The report warns policymakers about risks of digital and income divides from unequal AI diffusion. So, Amith, what is most surprising here? Anything that you're like, yeah, that's obvious?
Well, I think in Utah, I wonder if there's seasonality with respect to AI adoption, because in the wintertime, trying to use it to predict the best day to go skiing would be very high on my priority list. So.
They're like, every time there's a lot of snow in Utah, there's one individual there. His AI use spikes. It's crazy.
Well, preceding that, the AI usage would spike, and then during the snowfall, the AI usage would precipitously drop.
Right.
So I don't know who's doing AI while they're on the chairlift, but in any event, you can tell where my mind is heading at this time of the year. In any event, I think that the divide you're describing is super predictable, and a lot of it actually here doesn't have to do with money, because AI is so inexpensive, and that was quoted a couple times in what you said. But it's not about the cost of tokens as much as it is about the adoption being correlated to the wealth of the nation. And the other thing is, these smaller countries that have the ability to more quickly focus are able to drive change more rapidly. But it doesn't mean other people cannot do that. But education in general is how change is going to occur. in any realm. It's not just technology. And what we're talking about here are people who are open-minded to using new technologies. There's this flywheel effect that the more open-minded you are about using new tech, the better at using new tech you are, which of course in turn makes you more open-minded to using the next technology. So people who've adopted broadly mobile or the internet or computing in general are obviously going to be further along than people who have not yet adopted even basic digital technology. And so I think that is kind of a self-reinforcing cycle. But I do think it's really critical that governments address this, that nonprofits address this, that it's thought about very actively. I like the work that Anthropic has been doing here to try to raise awareness of this, because it actually doesn't take massive amounts of resources in terms of a shift in spending to empower people anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world to have access to basic AI tools. We're not talking about everyone having access to the very best AI, the most powerful frontier version of GPT-5 Pro in high mode or Claude 4.5 Sonnet or whatever is the latest model as you're listening to this. It's about having good AI, which is maybe 6 to 12 months behind that, but very good and essentially is very close to free. And so when you think about that, that's not the typical financial barrier to technology adoption. If you want to adopt electrification in the developing world, you have a massive amount of infrastructure you have to put in place, which requires tons of capital, lots of time, lots of skilled labor. Here we have the distribution of the internet, which is generally available even in the poorest parts of the world. Many people have mobile phones with the ability to connect to the internet, and we have the ability to deploy this technology broadly and at fairly reasonable cost. But we have to go do it. That's the key. We have to go do this thing. And so that's going to require a lot of people to agree that it's important and then to put some initiatives behind actually us working at it, right? It's a labor thing more than it is about capital, in my opinion. So, and that's just the very simplistic view of it. But the most important thing in my mind is just going back to our last conversation is at the societal level, finding a way to bring everyone along. The company can do that all day long with their hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees, and that's good. That's important for the company. That's important for those individuals' professional development. But for a nation and for the world, we have to bring everyone along. And so I think that's a lot of what this is talking about. I think the gap here, just because that gap is similar to past curves doesn't mean that it's preordained that it has to be so. So we have the opportunity to influence that outcome if we're willing to put some focus there. And I think this community of associations and more broadly the not-for-profit market can in fact have an outsized role in that.
The index reports automation is outpacing augmentation for the first time. Amith, do you think that's more about users trusting AI more, the models getting better? What do you think about that?
I think it's probably both of those things. I mean, you have to have trust to hand over anything to anybody. So it's like, Mallory, when you and I first started working together, I would say, hey, can you take care of this task for me or whatever? And you would go do it. And I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to have certain implied trust because we got to know each other during the interview process. I'm like, yeah, this is a good person. They're going to take care of this thing. But a lot of people don't feel that way about working with an AI, right? So if you didn't know me, would you ask me to do a whole bunch of things as a human? But on the AI side of it, how comfortable are you handing over and what degree of autonomy? But like with a person, you get to know them better and you get to go onto bigger and bigger projects when you've done most of the heavy lifting on the new edition of Ascend. And that's amazing. Congratulations on that, by the way. It's going to hit the press here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And if you're at digitalNow, you will get a copy. So that's going to be pretty exciting. But my point is that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was that we first crossed paths professionally, but it's like, I don't think that would have made sense for me to say, hey, take this whole book and go figure it out for lots of reasons, right?
I'm glad you didn't at that time.
It's capability, it's knowledge, but it's also as you get to know people better and you trust them more, you're like, oh, okay, there's a reinforcement loop happening. And I think people are experiencing that with ChatGPT and with Claude and with Gemini as well. They're getting more comfortable because they've had good results. If people weren't having good results, do you think ChatGPT would have over 1 billion monthly active users at this point? Of course not. It takes a lot more than a novelty to do that, to have people come back. So I think that's part of it. The model capability is also important. But the thing I actually keep pointing people to is think about the time horizon that an AI is able to work independently, right? So you can look at all these benchmarks like ArcAGI2, and you can look at MMLU and all these other benchmarks that are out there of different capabilities of different models. And they're interesting, but they're not necessarily telling you what the outcome is, like what can it actually do for you. Whereas these metrics that are looking at how long can Claude Code work on its own to produce a functional piece of software, which I think at the moment is something like 7 to 12 hours, something like that. and GPT-5, I think, claimed to be able to work for 48 hours on its own. And the assumption, by the way, is that these things aren't just like looping there doing useless things, that they're actually doing valuable, productive work for that long. That tells you a lot, right? So an AI model 2 years ago most certainly would not have been able to work maybe even more than a couple minutes on its own. And most of that was because it was so slow, it was producing like 3 characters, per second or something. So that's a good thing to pay attention to, is how long can AI work independently? And so that's why you see automation outpacing augmentation. People like to comfort themselves saying, people are still saying this. I actually said this 2 years ago on stage a lot, that it wouldn't be AI replacing you in your job, but it would be someone who knows how to use AI well. I think that statement is now 2 years expired, because AI has been capable of doing the majority of tasks of many professions for some time, and now it will soon be able to do the majority of tasks in most professions. Doesn't mean the profession goes away; many of the tasks go away. So why would you not automate if you could? If you trust the thing and if it's competent, do you want to do extra work? I think most people to that question would say no, they don't like doing extra work. So I'm certainly seeing that with software development. We're seeing more and more and more automation.
So Anthropic made this data publicly available on an interactive site tracking AI usage by state and occupation. Do you think there's any practical takeaways associations could get by looking at that map, and especially if it's like a state association or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have geographic concentrations, or if you're an industry association in a particular area like California, or a particular region of the country or region of the world, that's worth looking at. I think looking at it by occupation is super, super relevant to everyone. If you're a professional association and you work with a particular field, well, then you should kind of get a good idea of what's going on. That'll give you a much better insight than a member survey you did that had 100 respondents or something. You're going to get a much broader sample from actual usage data. And usage data is super important to understand, because when you're talking about the context of people providing their own feedback through Q&A, which is the age-old survey, there is value in that. You can get some qualitative insights that way. But a lot of times people unintentionally, most of the time, sometimes intentionally, do not tell you the truth for various different reasons. And we've known this about surveys for a long, long time. People are either aspirational in their responses or guarded in their responses. If they feel it's a sensitive topic, they're less likely to be truthful. We've known this for generations with surveys and responses, and we have to do corrections for that. There's all sorts of statistical methods to try to address those issues, but ultimately they're all basically good guesses. Whereas with empirical results from actual usage, you know exactly what people are doing. They're not fooling you by acting differently in front of Claude and in order to skew the data or something. And it's just something that you can get constant, continuous, real-time insight. And there's no inaccuracies because it's actually what people are doing. Now, the methods used to aggregate the data, of course, could have some flaws, et cetera. But I think the folks at Anthropic are pretty good at stats. So I'd trust that their report is pretty usable.
Well, Amith, that's bringing us to the end of today's Sidecar Sync conversation. I'm curious, out of all of our topics, really between the first two, so the hand or the AI education mandates, what do you think has the most sizzle?
Hopefully the one about training, because it's the most actionable thing. So,
Right.
Get back on that soapbox for a second. It's the thing out of all this stuff that we've talked about that you can go do something about today. So that would be one that I hope got people's attention, if not the sizzle in kind of the fun way. But the commentary I'd make is, if you're not interested in robotics or any form of physical AI, you should get interested in it, because all of us, inhabit bodies that are made of atoms, not bits. As much as we spend our time doing digital things, we're still biological species that consist of, the physical world and interact with the physical world. So it's something you should pay attention to, even if you haven't thought of that. It's something super relevant to you. And you don't need to be a sci-fi junkie or whatever. I'm actually not one of those, but you just have to have a little bit of curiosity. I think it's worth looking at, because it will open up your mind to new possibilities. And the trend line across all these three different topics, they might seem very different, but they're very related.
I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot more about robotics too on this podcast in the future. Everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sidecar Sync podcast. If you want to dive deeper into anything mentioned in this episode, please check out the links in our show notes. And if you're looking for more in-depth AI education for you, your entire team, or your members, head to sidecar.ai.